On the whole, turtles and tortoises are fairly low maintenance, but nutrition can be a tricky thing. With hundreds of mouths to feed here at Kamp Kenan, I take their diets pretty seriously.
I'm not just a tortoise farmer. I'm something of an amateur botanist. That's because I grow things my animals love to eat. Free food is good food.
As a pro bike rider, action sports announcer, and off-road adventurer, I'm always on the go. But for my true passion as a reptile breeder, I created my own sanctuary in South Florida. This is Kamp Kenan.
One of the biggest mistakes I see new tortoise keepers make is the fact that they're always feeding their tortoises every single day. Here at Kamp Kenan, I actually feed my animals 2 to 3 times a week, and that's it. And that goes for the hatchlings as well as some of the adults. 70% of what my animals eat is all around you. Take Lumpy, for example. Lumpy came to me from Long Island, New York. And I called him Lumpy because years ago, when he was much smaller, he had a lot of pyramiding. That was because the owners kept him inside and they were always feeding him a diet rich in produce from the supermarket. That is made for human consumption. That means it's got so much vitamins that an animal like a human being with a high metabolism really could use and need. The tortoise, they're designed to eat a very low nutrient diet like grass, and they walk and nibble and grow slower. They're really an amazing product of evolution. That these animals can survive in such harsh environments is because of that slow metabolism. So after I got him down here and converted him to a diet of grass all day long, as much as he wants to eat, and then produce just about twice a week, I noticed a really good thing happening to his shell. Look at him. He has started to put on these flatter growth rings. His shell, is as smooth as it will ever be. He's always going to have this, but to me, that's not a really grotesque pyramiding. So the goal is to try and get your tortoise to grow slow and steady, just like Aesop's fable. You want to feed them a couple times a week, and you got to try and mimic what they're doing in the wild. And this is it, walking and nibbling. All right, so here's me going to the grocery store. Admittedly, I know that this is not something that everyone can do, but this is what we should be trying to strive for with keeping our animals. You want to create this natural environment. This is called elephant grass. Elephants eat it in Africa. It's got a lot of nutrients, but not so much nutrients that it's detrimental to their growth or their shells. So you can see some of these animals have some pyramiding, which is actually par for the course with this species. Leopard tortoises and star tortoises will get some kind of natural pyramiding. The key is to not make it, like I said earlier with the sulcata, you just don't want to make it a grotesque looking pyramiding. That's just not the way these animal shells should be growing. A lot of people freak out over pyramiding, but the fact is no one knows exactly what causes it. As I mentioned, with the leopards and stars, it can be a natural occurring thing. Humidity at an early age in the animal's development when it's a hatching can cause it. Metabolic bone disease, diet, these all play into a factor. And one of the big things I believe is actually growing the animal too quickly. So slow, steady growth for these animals. Let's get a little more food for them. The great thing about this is, in a week, this is all back. Okay, this should be a staple of all tortoise keepers. It's spineless prickly pear. Kind of a oxymoron if you think about it. But basically there are no spines on this cactus. Sometimes they get little hairs, but this is one of the best foods for your tortoises. Any of the tortoise species love this stuff. Now, we were talking about the sulcata, the leopard, and now if you come on down here, you're going to see the Indian star tortoise. The thing that those tortoises all have in common is they are grassland species that focus on grasses, cacti, succulents, and browsing, leaves and such. Not a lot of fruit in their diet. They'll only get fruit seasonally in the wild, so I don't tend to give them too much fruit except in the winter when I want to hydrate them a little bit more. When it's dry here in Florida, I wind up giving them a little bit of watermelon because it's high in water. This is just one way for me to make sure that they're getting enough hydration, because that's very important for your tortoises also. Just because it lives in the desert doesn't mean it doesn't drink. So make sure you always got water for these guys. So you can see they love the cactus, and in a little while there'll be a bunch of tortoises over here. Then there are tortoises like the redfoot tortoise or the cherry head tortoise that we just saw right here that can eat a higher concentration of fruit. This is a mango. It fell off the tree just behind me. Now, fruit is definitely going to be something you can feed the cherry heads, the redfoots, the yellowfoots, the elongateds, mountain tortoise. Those species come from forests where fruit's more plentiful. Unlike the sulcata, the star tortoises, hermins, marginated, any of your drier species don't get fruit often. So I say not to feed too much fruit in those diets. Like I said, a little bit of watermelon in the winter when they don't get enough hydration, that's the key. But these guys, about 70% of what I feed them is the cactus, the grasses, different produce, albeit in small amounts, and then fruits. Another thing I have to stress upon you is you'll hear people say, oh, you shouldn't feed them iceberg lettuce, or don't feed them Missouri tortoise chow. Why they say not to feed those is because, to be perfectly honest, most people are lazy. They don't want to put a variety in the animal's diet. So what happens is they're looking for something easy. They just throw the pellets down, throw iceberg lettuce down, and then they think that's good enough for their tortoise. It's not good enough for a human being to eat one type of food. It's not good enough for an animal that spends its life walking around nibbling on different variety of weeds and plants. So you have to do the same thing if you want your animals to be healthy. Variety is the spice of life. So go ahead, feed them a bunch of different foods. I like the prepared diets as long as it's not the only thing you're feeding them.
Right now, I'm going to let these guys enjoy this mango. But if you have any more questions about tortoise nutrition, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I'll see you next time on Kamp Kenan.